I'm Hilary Meyer, fisheries biologist with South Dakota Game Fish and Parks, and I'm here to interview Dennis Unkenholz today, retired South Dakota Game Fish and Parks and member of Hall of Excellence. Dennis, how did you become involved in the American Fisheries Society, and why did you decide to be part of the fisheries management section?
Well, as a student at South Dakota State, we were oftentimes encouraged to get involved professionally in things, and so it was a natural. And at that time, it was our local chapter was a composite of North Dakota, South Dakota, and Montana, and we focused a lot on Missouri River issues, some common issues. So it seemed like there was a work connection as well as that professional sense that we need to be involved in those kind of groups.
And how did being involved with AFS help your career?
Well, you got to interact with some really sharp people and people that had experienced some of the same kinds of challenges that we faced here in South Dakota, and so it was a benefiting experience from just a work management perspective as well as professional development. So it was one of the keys, I think, in terms of making successful biologists in South Dakota, and in a sense it was our continuing education.
Mm-hmm. Did you have a mentor or individuals who greatly influenced your career?
Well, I'm sure there were a number of different people along the way. I mean, starting in high school. Mm-hmm. And then as I got into college, the professors obviously were mentors, had a great influence on you, both academically as well as professionally, because they've had a lot of experience in similar things. In some cases, they had been state biologists or they had other careers and then got connected with universities. So they brought in a real variety of experience, and I can think of people that were working when I started, like Bob Hanton, for example. Mm-hmm. He'd been around here for years and years and years, and of course we knew of Bob when we were still in college, and he was one of my first supervisors. In fact, he was on the interview committee when I interviewed for the first job with the Game Fish and Parks.
Oh, really?
So he was, yeah. And I got to hang around him for just about my whole career. So guys like that. If I look through this list of honorees, that I can identify a number that I've either worked with, friends with, professional friends, hunted with. So you'd say collectively there's a lot of these fellows that have been a mentor in some sense, and I can look back with a lot of memories and good experiences.
All right. Did you ever consider any other careers?
I did. When I was in high school, I thought maybe I'd be a teacher, or maybe a veterinarian or something like that. But I thought, well, what kind of a lifestyle would I like? And I thought, I want to stay in the Midwest somewhere. I grew up in Minnesota, and mm-hmm. I thought, well, I like the Dakotas, Minnesota. So what can I do that will stay there? And I had a good high school buddy who was a year older than I was that went to South Dakota State. And he was very into that school in terms of what it had to offer for wildlife and fishery students. And he said, well, if you're thinking about this, you've got to come down here and take a look. You've got to look at South Dakota State. So at that time, my options were University of Minnesota and South Dakota State. And Brookings was closer to where I grew up, and turned out even with out-of-state tuition, it was the same kind of money. So I obviously chose South Dakota State.
Mm-hmm. It's a good choice.
Yeah.
How do you think American Fisheries Society can help prepare our profession for the challenges ahead?
Well, I think collectively, the professionals that are involved bring a wide variety of experience, and so you can share experiences and you can say, well, we've tried this before, we've done that, and just the challenge to maintain your professional approach to things. And we oftentimes thought we had it figured out here in South Dakota, and then we'd go listen to some papers at a meeting someplace and find out, well, there's maybe other ways of looking at things, and we could give and take and share and learn from others. And I think that really is a key part of it.
What does being inducted into the Hall of Excellence mean to you?
Well, it's a humbling experience. I mean, it's an award you don't apply for, you don't work for it. I mean, that's not on my game plan or my radar. It was a surprise.
What do you believe is your biggest contribution to the fisheries profession?
I suppose, I guess I would say finding and hiring quality staff. It takes a team. You have to have a good mix of the right players to have an effective team, and I think that was something that I always had in my mind, and I tried to hire the right person for the right job and at the right time, and then give them the authority and responsibility to do their work, and just support them and encourage them and whatever it took.
Mm-hmm.
I got involved in a lot of really neat things over the years, and I don't know that I can take credit for a lot of things, but I was there as a worker and a supporter, and maybe maintained a lot of things that were already in gear, but I think having a good staff was one of the things that I can feel good about.
Mm-hmm. What words of wisdom do you share with students or young biologists?
Get involved, know your user groups. I mean, get to know the people that essentially you're working for. Understand their interests and needs and preferences, it seems like we've had the biology figured out for a lot of years, but implementing things and really getting the community support, if you will, or the user group support to accomplish things was critical. And we learned, for example, when we implemented the first size restriction in South Dakota back in 1990, we had the biology all figured out and couldn't understand why everybody wasn't just jumping on the wagon and saying, hey, that's a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
And we learned that we had to go around the state and listen to their concerns and questions and share information that we had and help them understand why this was going to benefit them in the long run. And we learned that once we were able to do that sometimes they'd say, well, why haven't you done this already?
Really?
And I don't know if you want to call it informed consent, but we would help the people understand what the problem or opportunity was.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes if we debated the issue or the problem enough, the solutions seemed pretty obvious. And if you could get fishing groups, sportsman groups, chamber of commerce's, civic groups, whatever it was, involved to the point they understood what the issue was or the opportunity, sometimes they're more than helpful in getting it implemented.
All right.
was a long answer to a short question.
Oh, that's all right. That's great information.
Yeah.
And I'd like to ask your thoughts about other inductees. Which fellow inductees influenced you the most, and how?
He knew South Dakota. He knew every water in the state, and he'd been there. And you know, he'd lived it and was the fisheries program for years and years and years in South Dakota. So he obviously had a large influence. And then, you know, a guy like Dave Willis, who worked in a state management situation and had that solid background, plus a very sound academic background, who came to South Dakota State and then was very helpful in terms of sharing their experience as a university as well as what he had learned throughout his career, and was very good at connecting academics with on-the-ground management. And he was a very sound manager and knew the kind of program South Dakota had and our abilities to do things like research. You know, we were staff limited at that time, and so he was able to use a lot of the resources at the universities, a lot of graduate student projects, and really was functioning as an extension of Game Fish and Parks research, if you will. And so we had a very close connection, and very influential in helping with management issues in South Dakota, as well as training people that ultimately became staff people here. So there was several ways that we connected with the university, and he obviously had a huge impact in that. Some of the other guys I know were long time, like Carl Sullivan, who I had actually met. Huge influence professionally. I mean, he was the face of the AFS for years and years and years, and a lot of the success of that group can be attributed to guys like Carl Sullivan, you know, Bob Martin, Bob Jenkins, who I have met but didn't ever work with directly, was very influential in some of the early work on the large rivers in South Dakota, or in the country actually.
All right. Yeah. Great. Well, thank you, Dennis, on behalf of Fish Management Section, and for everything that you've done for fisheries.
You're welcome.